panel will focus on the current state of venture capital in our industry and a host of economic factors that impact investment. Having the perspective of these venture capital firms will be very timely and informative. Our moderator, Karey Barker, has extensive experience when it comes to VC funding. She is the founding managing director of Cross Creek and has led investments in a variety of industries, including healthcare. She founded Cross Creek in 2006 to address what she saw as a need to better understand emerging themes and competition. She has served on multiple boards and currently serves on the board of AREP Labs. Let's welcome Karey and our panelists for the next discussion.
Okay, looks like my mic's on and Allison's right. This is not a chair for short people. Well, thank you, Kelvin, very much. Our last panel ended on fundraising, and we're going to expand on that topic a little bit more. It was interesting because maybe Dan was being sarcastic when he said he loved fundraising. I think most CEOs don't. I think David is probably much more typical in his sentiment of really hating fundraising. Before I have the panelists introduce themselves, maybe by a show of hands, how many of you here work at a company that either has raised venture capital or hopes to raise venture capital? Okay, quite a lot. And so I think this is going to be, really going to be a very interesting group. We've got a great group of panelists here today. And, maybe we'll just start by having each of them introduce themselves both from a personal standpoint as well as a little bit of background on your firm and your target investments. And we'll start with Art.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's great to be back in this area. I'm based in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. Pappas Capital is a 29-year-old venture capital firm. We've focused always in the life sciences. My background is from the life sciences. On a personal perspective, I came to North Carolina, believe it or not, from the military. I ended up at Fort Bragg and loved it so much I never wanted to go back to where I grew up, which was up in New York in the South Bronx. Anyway, Pappas Capital, we've raised over $800 million across our various funds. We operate with 3 different business lines. We have our Pappas Ventures funds, which are traditional venture capital funds. We're investing out of our 6th fund right now. We just started investing from that. It's a $150 million fund. We have a specialized fund management group that does single LP type relationships. The 2 large ones in there are a venture fund in rare and orphan diseases, and then we have an Asia Innovation Ventures fund that's very early stage investing in disruptive technologies in companies domiciled in China, mainland China, Hong Kong, and Singapore. We also have a translational medicine initiative, which is one of the reasons I'm here talking to some of the universities. And this is where a university is an investor, is in our funds, and then what we do is we help industrialize their tech transfer platform. We've got a great team that's around the United States, and we have a team in Asia. We've got a nice investment track record, but we've also had 25 FDA-approved products come out of our seed Series A portfolio companies.
Great. James?
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for having me. It's my first time here, so be gentle. I guess a bit about me. So I'm an MD by background. If you haven't noticed already from the accent, I grew up in the UK. I trained and practiced in London before coming over to the States for business school. Spent some time at another venture capital fund before joining NEA. I guess a bit about NEA. So we have been around for a while. We are currently investing out of our 18th funds. We've got around 25 billion under management. The fund is split into tech and healthcare. I just invest in private biotech companies. And we're pretty stage, geography, area, modality agnostic. We tend to look for, I guess, good companies, good management teams, and good technology. So yeah, looking forward to meeting many of you today.
Great. Israel.
Hi, Israel Rollins here. Greetings from Nashville. No, I didn't say howdy. Greetings from Nashville. And I know a lot of people accuse VCs of groupthink, but our attire here is not by any means indicative of that. So, again, greetings from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm Israel Rollins, managing partner with Alliant Health Ventures, where we are a new fund. We just launched fundraising for our maiden fund in January, and we're focusing on early stage healthcare services, software, and technology startups with a bent towards really focusing on addressing health inequities. And I can talk a little bit about that later, but we're really excited about being here, first time here in the state, in the city, and have a little shameless plug. We're so excited. We got our first deal closed as I flew in yesterday. It's a materials innovation for medical device manufacturers to sterilize in line. So we're really excited about that and would love to, I got my BD hat on for my portfolio company to meet with you all and see if there's opportunities for pilot opportunities. By background, I'm a clinical pharmacist turned healthcare executive, administrator, startup co-founder, sold that to a middle market company, did a search fund and bought a medical device company from a defense contractor and pulled it out from a defense contractor as a standalone company, which I don't recommend doing. But, and from there we decided to launch this really great little fund, Alliant Health Ventures.
Great, thank you. Well, you'll notice that we are obviously missing a panelist today. Unfortunately, Jenny has COVID. It's not over, despite what we're all hoping, and she wasn't able to join. So she sends her regrets. Well, with that, let's jump into some questions. So the venture environment, it's been a pretty wild ride, a couple of very hot years, maybe not so much right now. So maybe we'll start with Art to just tell us, what are your thoughts on the venture environment for life sciences today? And, are you making new investments or other people? Is it going to be a lot harder for some of those in our audience looking to raise money now than it might have been the last couple of years?
Well, I'm glad the SVB thing is over, let's put it that way. But there are some important lessons in that, and some of the comments made in the previous panel are important to just follow through with. One in particular, when you're managing cash at the company level or even at the fund level, that you're managing various levels of diversity to manage the cash that you may be handling. From a fund level, we're a fiduciary, so therefore it is important that we pay attention to where our cash goes in that regard. As far as today's environment, this is very reminiscent of the period that we went through in 2008, 2009, where everyone had to kind of step back from a really frothy market. And when we all realized that the market we were in was pretty frothy. In fact, many of us, I think the biotech sector as a whole corrected a year before the rest of the market corrected. And that puts us in a good position as we come out of this situation to be in a position to do some investing. We feel good that we closed a new fund. We're ready to invest. We're going to make our first investment from that fund before the end of the month. And those funds are primarily interested in investing in therapeutics. What I worry about as we come through this sector is what happened in 2008, 2009, and that is many of the funds that were investing in that kind of heyday frothiness that we had, stopped managing their reserve policies as they should. They're having difficulty raising their next fund, so to speak, and it's good to hear Israel say that he's got his fund doing. Syndicates have fallen apart. We've had the benefit of working with groups like NEA as one of our regular syndicate partners, and that builds a strong relationship across the board. But I do think the market is open for investing, and we're going to see very attractive opportunities that funds that have funds will take advantage of.
Great. James, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with a lot of what was just said. Listen, the era of cheap money is over. the Fed's probably going to up interest rates again another 25 or 50 bips later this month. I guess the interesting thing that we took away from the SBV situation was that if you actually look at the amount of venture dollars that were being deployed and also raised in the 3 months preceding the crisis, there was a precipitous drop-off. And that was one of the really sensitive indicators, I think, about what was going to happen. I guess when we think about the biotech markets in general, the public markets tend to go down before the privates. I think when we've gone back through data, we've seen, private valuations and fundraising tend to lag the public markets by about 6 to 9 months. So we're probably, still in the depths of things, I would argue. But that being said, some of the best companies that we've ever invested in came out of the last crisis. And we're continuing to deploy capital for that matter. Exactly. Good science doesn't follow economic cycles. Discoveries don't follow economic cycles. So even though it's tough out there, I would encourage all of you to carry on persisting because people are still deploying cash and there's still money to be raised.
I'm going to change the question up a little bit for you, Israel. You mentioned that you just raised a fund, and the tables are turned. When you're raising capital, you're the one out there pitching. And what do you tell your prospective investors about why they should invest in life sciences?
I think this is the golden era of healthcare innovation. Innovation will not stop. I think that there's a lot of tailwinds that are still persistent in pushing innovation forward. And I think coming from the regulatory standpoint, the legislative standpoint, and also the non-dilutive funding that we're seeing that's coming from the federal government through the 21st Century Cares Act, the HITECH Act, a lot of these different modalities to get capital, non-equity capital, into the hands of innovators. But I think the thing that really has me encouraged is what's going on in these ecosystems. In Nashville, of course, we're a healthcare services pretty much centric ecosystem. But here in Utah, I see that life sciences is the predominant innovative engine here. But I rarely see a state that gets behind their innovators as much as Utah. Believe it or not, you are so far ahead of the curve when you're looking at other states in terms of supporting and making sure the success of your healthcare startups make it even in tough times like this.
Great. James, do you want to lean, is it an attractive time to invest in life science?
I mean, it depends who you ask. Listen, I'm biased because it's my job. It's always going to be an attractive time. I think it's an attractive time if you understand the risks. The way we approach investments nowadays is, we try to capitalize the company to what we perceive to be, I guess, just progressing through this period of uncertainty and coming out the other side. So we don't want our companies to have to worry about going out to raise cash when interest rates are still at 3%, 4%, 5%, and banks are collapsing left, right, and center. I still think life sciences, if you look at the two main verticals of growth in the US and also globally, it's life sciences, healthcare, and technology, and that's not going to change. Israel hit the nail on the head already. It's a golden age, and that's not going to stop anytime soon.
So in our prior panel, there was a lot of talk about, the venture capitalists are looking for certain things. And your company might be phenomenal, but it's just not what they're looking for at the moment. So Art, maybe we'll start with you. What are some of the themes in life sciences, some of the specific ideas and themes that you're really excited about and you're looking for companies? And maybe follow on with something you think is maybe overhyped or that you think there's too many companies that you're less excited about?
So our focus is primarily therapeutics, and we are looking for first and best-in-class compounds. So we shy away from all the 505(b)(2) types of approaches. We also stay away from med tech devices and the like, and that's largely because we don't seem to be able to get that front end right, at least a group like ours. And we do work with some venture firms that have focused in that area and have that model down better. We like to be 18 months away from an IND filing, and that's typically how we've built our companies. We build from scratch 3 to 4 companies per fund. That's always worked out good for us in that regard. a good part of that is because we have 12 pharmaceutical companies, and a major CRO is part of our LP base, and we're probably one of the few funds that has that many that we manage. But that gives us terrific insight into what is next in that regard. I agree with what was said earlier. This is an important period to be investing. Our best performing fund was the one that we raised in 2008. So I think you're in a great position for this particular period. We don't do services, so we're strictly focused in that biology and chemistry arena. Well, what are we looking at? We're looking at the interface between AI and drug discovery. We're looking at how do we simulate clinical trials to get those drugs out faster. We're looking at an epigenetic company right now that I think could be interesting. Those are the types of things that we as a group look at. But we stay away from services, so it's nice to have a fund like yours around to take care of that. We stay away from med tech, but we don't shy away from really novel things that will change drug discovery and drug development, particularly where it can accelerate the patient enrollment.
Great. James, what are you excited about and what are you skeptical of?
I'm sure many of you have seen the Ozempic adverts, and I've been spending a lot of time looking at the metabolism, diabetes, and obesity space. I think there's a lot of interesting science in the area. There's a lot of misunderstood about the brain fat appetite axis. So I've been spending a while looking at that. I'm also interested in inducing immune tolerance. So I guess we looked quite strongly at the first wave of CAR Treg companies. Didn't invest in any, and are now very interested in looking at maybe a small molecule or such that can induce immune tolerance in a variety of diseases. Because I feel, cancer's always attracted a lot of capital, but autoimmune and inflammatory disease has yet to see the same inflection. Art, I'm going to have to disagree with you here because I'm very skeptical about AI drug discovery. We've probably seen 50 or 60 companies over the last 2 years. I've yet to see one that can actually accelerate the rate of drug discovery. I think the way I think about the use of AI now in drug discovery is the tools have become so ubiquitous. There are so many open source algorithms and platforms that anybody can go and pick up and use tomorrow without a computer science degree. So we're getting to the point where companies need to be almost AI enabled. There needs to be use of these tools as almost, as a backstop. With that lens, I've been more focused on looking at AI-enabled and structure-informed drug discovery. But we can debate that later. If you want.
No, I do agree with you. In fact, I use AI loosely because the next wave of activities, I think, will be more in the quantum area. And we have a collaborative partnership with SAS Analytics, which is SAS out of Karey, North Carolina, that most drug development that goes into an NDA submits on a SaaS platform. And we're using them now to help our companies really better assess their approach. And their view is that AI is getting passé. Everyone should have it as an enabling technology, but we're not certain how it moves into the quantum area at this point. But I don't disagree with you.
Great. Israel, what are you excited about? What are you skeptical of?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I'm a service guy mostly, but there are some things that are really exciting in terms of companion diagnostics. Our thesis at Alliant Health Ventures is focusing on reducing health disparities and focusing and getting to the source of truth. And the sooner that we can detect a lot of these disease states that are affecting underserved and minority populations like diabetes, like oncology, like neurodegenerative diseases and the like, I think that those companion diagnostics are very exciting to take a look at. The AI, ML has to be embedded in almost everything that you do. We're looking at a couple of companies that actually use this AI and ML to help with decision support. Not only with decision support, looking at data coming out of EHRs, but also imaging and helping to more facilitate better diagnosis helping the clinician in terms of throughput, in terms of looking at disease states in charts and images. So we're really excited about the promise that AI and ML has and computer vision has for the technologies that we want to see at the bedside and also inside the community.
Thank you. So you talked about things that you're interested in investing in. When you have a theme, are you waiting for companies to knock on your door? Are you proactively going to find them? How do you find the companies to invest in? And I don't know, James, maybe we'll start with you because you had some very specific targets.
Yeah, I think if you wait for them to come and knock on your door, you often end up missing out on great opportunities. So I guess the way I go about it personally is, well, I mean, listen, reading scientific papers, going to conferences, coming to places like this to meet people, like be on the ground, hear what's happening. I guess, we've been around for a long time, so we're very lucky to have a strong network of co-investors that will often send us deals as well. And I'll also, just proactively reach out to companies, cold email them and say, hey, do you want some money? Not in so many words. But yeah, it's tough. There's so much innovation out there. It's extremely difficult to keep on top. It's overwhelming at times. But it's about, finding the best sources, finding people you like investing with, one sitting right next to me, and trying to work together to find great companies and great people.
Great. Israel, Art, either of you jump in on that?
Yeah, I have the luxury, I guess. Most of my career has been at HCA down in Nashville, and eventually ran a hospital in Austin, Texas. In Nashville, which we like to say is the healthcare capital of the world, I kind of disagree with that in some instances, but it is indeed the greatest concentration of purchasing power here in the United States. So I get a chance to talk with a lot of operators, clinicians, and just ask them, I know we're in polite company here, but what sucks? And those are the type of questions that you ask to get to really the heart of the matter of problems that need to be solved. And we kind of look at that as the kind of the genesis of how we build our thesis, how we build our theme, and look at those things that these providers would see as key problems to solve. We're also seeing an advent of a growth of venture studios that are embedded inside of these corporations that are doing just that. They're right next to the customer and asking these seminal questions and building teams around it and deploying it among their network. So I think it's both inbound, outbound, but I really think, again, having the access to these providers and being able to ask them, what is the real difficult challenges that you face really helps us with our focus of our lens and the way that we look at opportunities.
Art, do you want to add anything to that?
I think it's been said well, yeah.
Great. Well, then maybe we'll start with you, Art, on the next question. I think on the prior panel, Andrea made a really great point that it's not just money, that the people really matter, and the people that are going to be your investors and on your board make a big difference. So when James reaches out to one of these companies and says, I want to give you some money, how does a CEO decide whether James is going to be helpful, or if they're out targeting investors, how does a company sort of understand that you don't do devices? Like, who is going to be interested in their company? And when they do get interested, are they the right investors? Are they going to be helpful?
Well, I think that's a paramount question for a CEO. I would like to think that most of us that are syndicating together have a similar approach to entrepreneurs coming in, where we're going to spend time with them. Whether we do the deal or not, we want to give them feedback. We want to build the relationship. We want to give them the right guidance or point them to VCs that we think would be able to go into that kind of space. And that for us has worked really well over our 29 years of investing. We have a lot of repeat syndicate partners come back to us. We have a lot of CEOs come back to us. And even though we're really interested in the science and the technology, we're really interested in the CEO and their team. Can they really execute what they're going to say? And do they really understand the fundamentals of a around their raising now, taking it through the regulatory process, and then also knowing what the financing is going to be in the next series of rounds. So I think it's a combination of we have to give back to the entrepreneurial community so they come back to us. And we found that that partners like NEA do that regularly, and we've learned our lessons from groups like that as well.
Great. James, you comment on that?
I always like to tell prospective management companies that, linking up with an investor is like a marriage in some ways. It's you're looking at 5 or 10 years of relationship. I mean, when we like to invest, we like to stick around, all the way from seed through to the public markets. And you want someone next to you that's going to be there for the good times and also the bad times, because, life sciences is hard. Like, things will go wrong inevitably. And I think the question you should be asking yourself is, like, do I have an investor next to me that I want to call and ask for advice, and is going to take bad news well, and is going to be there through the good times and the bad times, and do they buy into the long-term vision? And I think that should involve spending time with them. And I guess when we are going through, the solicitation process, we try to be open, transparent, and while we do our diligence, we'd expect you to do your diligence on us, and that involves, talking to other companies we've invested in, talking to other investors, and I think that's just a really vital part of the whole process that is potentially overlooked sometimes.
Right. And Israel, maybe you could lean in on kind of the last part of the question, that if I'm a company looking to raise money, how do I target the right kind of firms? Because if they call you on an early stage therapeutic, that's just not a fit. So what would you recommend to a first-time CEO in terms of getting that target list of people that might care?
Yeah, I agree with James said earlier. Do your due diligence. Do your market research. Talk to other entrepreneurs who have raised capital in the market. Sometimes it is not a fit, thematic fit, or a strategic fit, or a stage fit. I think that in raising capital, you will hear a lot of no's. And as an entrepreneur myself, launching a first-time fund, a maiden fund, we're hearing a lot of no's as well. But we are finding that sweet spot. But it is always great to get great feedback on what you're doing. And for us as venture capitalists, it's not always easy for us to say no. It's almost like telling somebody your baby's ugly. It's not a fun job. But I think with the more feedback that you can get and the more reps that you can have with your story, I think it makes a much better pitch down the road. So when you do find that match, and make no mistake, we're service providers. We're here for you. All egos aside, we are focused on supporting you with capital. We're supporting you with our IP, the brand of the firm, but we're also, at the end of the day, we're service providers.
Great, thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about your diligence process, because it's not just great idea, here's some money. What should companies expect? How long does it take? What's your typical time from nose to close on diligence, and what should they expect? Maybe James, you want to start with that? After you tell them you're not really just going to write a check, you're actually going to want to do a little work. What does the work look like?
Well, maybe to your first point, on the time, I think the quickest one we've done over the last 3 years has probably been 2 or 3 weeks. The longest has been 6 months. And that's mostly because we waited for some data. There was a hold up with an external provider for the company. But I think the overall thing to expect is hopefully transparency from both sides, so from us and also from you. We personally at NEA like to get very deep in the technical diligence. So that is looking at the science quite strongly. I guess when I go in with a lens looking at the technology, I like to think and come away with a good idea of both the strengths and the weaknesses. And then that should really inform the long-term plan, be that the rest of preclinical development or clinical development. Once we've gone into CDA with a company and gone into the data room, we like to speak to, other board advisors. We like to speak to your scientific advisory board if you have one set up. And then, we'll also tap our network and bring in some external advisors as well. I like to keep the financial aspects to the end because fundamentally you're investing in a technology and the deal structure shouldn't actually matter so much. But, that's important to some people, especially if there is, pressure from the company side to raise capital more quickly. So we like to be flexible. I try to be as transparent as possible and keep the company up to date with how we are doing in our diligence process and what hurdles we may be coming up against. And then hopefully we can work together to get past those hurdles.
I agree with what James said. One of the good things in investing in the life sciences, particularly therapeutics, is the amount of capital requires you to syndicate. So working with the syndicate partner and dividing up due diligence is very helpful. And our approach is not much different than what James outlined. The one thing, though, that we are doing differently, we've been doing it the last probably 6 months, is we're trying to get a handle initially on the financing approach and the way their expectations and the syndicate that's already in the company's expectations are sorting out. Everyone has heard this saying that the new up round is a flat A round or a flat B round. That's your new up round. Well, getting some of that expectation really sorted out with some of these other syndicates and the CEO has been an important question we've started to ask before we weigh in on some of our diligence, at least at this point, or we wait for somebody else to bring us the message in that regard. A lot of folks, didn't go public, and therefore they've got these high Series A valuations, and they still need $100 million to bring in to do the Series B and to get the product into the clinic. And getting that pre-money valuation on that Series B is an important step, and we want to make sure that we're in a position to be able to address that earlier than later. That's the only thing we've done differently recently.
Thank you. What about maybe Israel answer that, but particularly with an eye to the corporate VCs. Do you include them in your list? I mean, letting them do diligence can be a double-edged sword, and you've got some background on that side.
Yeah, prior to founding Aligned, I was with Sandbox Industries, kind of a hybrid corporate third-party VC where we were representing 32 of the 35 Blue Cross plans through the Blue Venture Fund, and basically all of the investments were geared towards, how can we better the Blues? And again, you put all the Blues together, it's like a Fortune 5 company, so there's incredible purchasing power. So I really see very little downside from working with corporate VCs and getting them involved early. I'm always a big champion for getting as close to the customer as possible. Now, when you've seen one corporate VC, you've seen one corporate VC, because there's definitely different layers of and levels of engagement. When I was with Sandbox Blue Venture Fund, there were several points of engagement with our portfolio companies, the pipeline companies, to be able to interact with advisory boards either by book of business or by functional status, chief medical officer, technology officers, chief pharmacy officers, and the like. So that was a great feedback mechanism, and it helped us, again, sharpen our aperture in terms of what we were looking for in these type of opportunities. But in terms of how that impacted the timeline for diligence, it definitely extended it because there were more and more conversation. But when we looked at our loss ratio, it really helped us improve on that because we got that feedback early and often. So I think that, again, with corporate VCs, there's, other than just kind of a drawn-out process, I see very little downside. You guys might.
James or Art, I mean, on the therapeutic side, where the corporate VC could be is much more likely to be your acquirer or maybe your competitor. Do you have any concerns about corporate VC early?
We have 12 investors in our funds that are corporates, not their VC arm, but they're in. So we disclose immediately to every company that comes in our base of. And if they have a concern about their therapeutic area, then we just don't have them present. As far as a corporate VC, though, we've had pretty good success in working with some of the sophisticated corporate VCs. I mean, JJDC is the best known in the area, but SR1 when they were in business as part of SGSK was a good arm. Roche's arm is good, but we've had a pretty good experience.
I would echo that. I guess the only concern we sometimes have about bringing corporate VCs is about the technology and protection of IP, and there are certainly ways to structure that. So I guess the last 3 or 4 deals we've done with corporates where they've come onto the cap table, we have kept them as board observers, and they're not there for BD discussions at all, which is important, not only to generate some competitive tension and keep them guessing what's happening, but also to protect the company itself. But we've had very positive experiences working with all of them. They can often be a great source of, I guess, information, and they will open up their networks internally. So you can talk to scientists, clinical development teams at some of the biggest pharma companies in the world. So all around positive, I would say.
Great. Well, I'm going to give you one more question and then see if the audience has some questions for this panel. And the last question is just, we're operating in a highly regulated industry. So both the diligence process and after you invest, how does that impact your investment decisions, and how can you support the companies afterwards to navigate? I don't know. Art, you want to start?
Yeah, look, one of the beauties of investing in the life sciences is it is regulated, and we kind of know what we have to accomplish as we move forward in that regard. I am surprised when companies come to us to look at an early stage company and they've laid out their regulatory plan, how many of them have not gone to speak to the FDA or taken advantage of the FDA's process to be able to validate what they're going to want to see when the time comes. And they rely, not that they shouldn't rely on consultants, but they're overly relying on consultants when an easy phone call to the FDA would make sense. So we do like to see and pay attention to CEOs that are really have taken the opportunity in hand to speak to the FDA appropriately. What are the challenges? I mean, it is a regulatory process. Look, we're going through that now with accelerated approvals. And we're going through that now where the view is, since we've done so much enzyme replacement or gene editing, the right question is, we don't know what's going to happen 10 years down the road. So the FDA now asks for longer confirmatory trials, which is a challenge because we got to figure out how to finance those. And will it make sense, particularly in the ultra-rare disease areas where it's a more narrow field? So there's a good and a bad to the regulatory process.
I mean, I would echo all of that. I would actually give the FDA some credit and say I think they've been very good at modernizing. They've been good at opening up communication lines so that people can access them earlier and have really conversations without any consequences. I would also say, maybe on the other regulatory side, that we're seeing the impact of the current administration at the moment with the way the IRA is being applied to both healthcare and maybe drug prices. And I think that's one of the things that's really top of mind for us at the moment. There's rumors about the Pfizer Seagen acquisition and how that was influenced by the IRA. But I think it remains to be seen, for those of you that are concerned, what the actual impact is going to be, and how the current administration are going to see pushback.
And Israel's for services, what are your thoughts on what's going on in Washington?
Yeah, I think, again, what Art mentioned about being in a regulated industry, it's a good thing, but it also has challenges. Those are barriers to entry. I think with services, it's not as, well, you definitely have regulatory challenges and issues and standards that you have to meet. And I think I want to respond more as a question back, to the group. Data collection is really a big thing in terms of getting the products to market in human and then in commercialization. One of the things that I see as a venture capitalist and also an operator is that there's not a lot of thought beforehand in the early stages of getting the data in how these therapeutics are placed in the formularies of these entities, either these hospital systems or if it's something that's going to be marketed, the formularies of these pharmaceutical, PBMs. So in terms of regulatory filings, I know it may not be a piece of that. Just want to get you all thoughts on how can we incorporate a little bit more emphasis on understanding the pricing, putting in cost-benefit analysis, and looking at really the outcomes and the endpoints that hospitals would really want to see, lowering length of stay, preventing hospitalizations, and reducing readmissions. So I just want to kind of toss that back to the group and get your thoughts.
Either of you want to comment?
We try to look at pricing when we do a preclinical program, but it's really a tough call. We try to be practical in that regard. Look, just if we like NEA, we've been looking at the neuroscience area and looking at some Alzheimer's drugs because there is a real need there. And there to be able to improve Alzheimer's by 3 to 5 years is a huge impact on the on the healthcare system. How we quantify that, I don't have a magic ball on that, but it is something we try to.
Okay. Well, I've got one more question, but if there's a burning question in the audience, I'd love to give you an opportunity to. Anyone out there? Okay, well, if not, I'm not seeing any hands. I think with the few minutes we have left, I'd really love to hear from you, each of you, just your final advice to these founders and management teams that are considering raising their first round or their next round in this current environment. What is your advice to them? Art?
Well, look, if you've got a novel idea, what's beautiful about the entrepreneurial community in the life sciences, take it forward, but figure out what the elements are, particularly in a regulatory process, to take it forward. And then be realistic about how you want to structure a financing plan in terms of where you are. If you're preclinical or you're phase 1, what is going to be the plan that you're going to develop? And bless you, if you've got $100 million of grants in your company, it may not be part of your pre-money value. So be realistic in that regard also.
I'd echo what I said earlier. It's tough out there, but persist. One thing I love about working in this industry is that there aren't a lot of egos most of the time. And leverage people, like ask them for introductions. Don't be afraid to go out there and say, yes, you said no, yes, you're passing for now, but like which other investors would you recommend that I work with, and can you email them for me? Because that takes 15 seconds out of someone's day. So don't be afraid to make people work for you as well, because entrepreneurship is hard. Everyone recognizes that, and take advantage of people's goodwill.
Israel?
Yeah, I say story time. In business school, my best friend was a NFL football player, center. But he came into the NFL undersized from a D3 school, 6-foot guy, but he was killing the league. Went undrafted. Nobody gave him a look. But because of a call from his coach to a friend of his that was the O-line coach at the Pittsburgh Steelers, they gave him a look. And he got the call and had a long career, 5 or 6 years in the NFL. Said all that to say this: never give up. You only need that one catalytic investor that can get behind you and believe in you and championing you. Like you said, Israel, you don't need all 32 teams to like you, just need one. And I think if, again, you get that catalytic investor that believes in what you do, that can go a very long way. So just don't give up.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we've just got 2 minutes left still. Is there anyone want to ask a question? Right here, thank you.
So, over the years...
We'll wait for a mic so we can pick you up on the recording.
Over the years, venture capital is kind of like the wide tie. It kind of, things change and such. And one of the areas is kind of product companies versus platform companies and such. Where do you think we are today?
Great question.
I can start off on that one if you like. We're investors in a lot of platform companies. It's a difficult road. It's a different road to a product-focused company as well. Because, at the end of the day, how do you make money? It's spitting products out of that platform. And The balance, I think, really comes from understanding the limitations and the known unknowns of the platform. So by that, I mean, what are the unknown questions about the technology that need to be asked? And are you going to be able to answer those, but at the same time develop a product? I guess I'm involved in one company at the moment where we're going through that exercise right now. And I think to a positive to the management team is they have a really good grasp of that. And it's been a great exercise in evaluating where we're going to be when and what the capital requirements are. But, platform companies are never going away. But I'm sure the other panelists have some ideas on that.
I agree with you. In fact, we're looking at one of your companies right now as a platform.
We'll take this offline.
And we're trying to figure that out. But what happened in 2008, 2009, platforms fell out of favor. It needed to be a product outcome, and most of the financing shifted in that way. But platforms are important, and those that did make the shift and had a good platform are the ones that we continue to look at and like. But for the near term, I think it's going to be, for most VCs, it's going to be mostly a product orientation.
Great. Well, thank you very much. You were great. So big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.